What's up, Earth's mightiest subscribers? It's Blur Without Fear. Welcome back to the channel. This one's going to be a little bit of a double video because we're going to be talking about a.x.e. Death to the Mutants #1 by Kieran Gillen and Gui Villanova, as well as X-Men #13 by Jerry Duggan and C.F. Villa. And in this video, one of the things we're going to be talking about is that for as much as we've heard the Eternals, Druig, and Uranos' side of things in this whole Judgment Day Marvel Comics event, we're finally going to learn how the core Eternals feel about the war between the Eternals and the X-Men, as well as the Eternals' surprising response to their new celestial god's mandate to justify their existence. We'll also be talking a little bit about which Eternal is secretly feeding the X-Men information on how to stop their fellow Eternals, Uranos and Druig, as well as whether or not they're going to reveal the secret about Eternal resurrection. And we'll also talk a little bit about who has the more powerful telepaths, the Eternals or the X-Men.
You can't see me, you Stevie, wondering how I reach more evolutions than Evie and make it look easy.
Okay, so first things first, one of the things that I want to talk about here was just the simple fact that, yeah, we've gotten a lot of talk from Druig. Druig has pretty much been the face of the Eternals since he became Prime Eternal in Eternals #12. The other Eternals, while yes, we've seen Makkari and a.x.e. here and there, we have seen Cersei here and there, it's really been Druig who has been front and center since the prelude to Judgment Day kicked off, and pretty much one of the only faces we see a lot of after the start of Judgment Day. We already know what Druig's side of this is. Druig wants death for all mutants, as the title would suggest, but it's not really what he actually wants. Druig doesn't actually care whether or not the mutants live or die. He honestly couldn't give a squirrel fart about what the mutants are doing. He doesn't care about excess deviation, even though it's one of his prime directives from his own gods, the Celestials. But that said, he only cares about this right now because it's what's going to keep him as Prime Eternal. Druig already knows he doesn't have enough charm and charisma to be loved by his fellow Eternals to keep him in the Prime Eternal seat for longer than it takes to heat up a Hot Pocket. But he knows that if he puts them on a mission to do something, if he charges them with upholding their Prime directives, they are going to stay by him, especially if he gives them what would be for Eternals a holy war. That's how we get to Judgment Day. The notion that he is putting them on a warpath with mutant kind and deeming them as deviants, charging them with having achieved the ability to resurrect themselves similarly to how the Eternals do. Druig has made a fair case for the Eternals to go to war with mutant kind. But that's not really the whole story. We've never really heard Ikaris or even Cersei, Makkari or a.x.e. or hell, even Sprite's thoughts on the matter for any of this, really. It's mostly been glossed over. The idea that Ikaris and the rest of the gang were helping a.x.e. and Makkari with creating this new celestial god just kind of imply that they weren't on Druig's side in this, despite advertising saying the exact opposite. The truth is that no, none of them want to be a part of this war. None of the Eternals want to fight the mutants. Not Ikaris, not Cersei, not Athena, not Kingo, nobody. Sprite even says, I have no beef with the mutants. I like them. They're not bad people. Why are we fighting them? And this just goes back to that age-old, and not just a Marvel Comics thing, but just comics in general. Whenever you see one of these big events, or even just a single issue comic that says this side versus this side, this character versus that character, where they make it seem like there's some kind of an absolute to this, whatever it is, like Avengers versus X-Men was way more nuanced than just Avengers versus X-Men, because the reality of Avengers versus X-Men is that not every X-Men was on the X-Men side and not every Avenger was on the Avengers side of things. It was one of those areas where there was a little bit more shade of gray in the middle of that equation than advertising would have allowed you to believe. And this is actually even more so. I wouldn't say double down, I would dare say triple down on it, because a lot of the literature and advertising for Avengers versus X-Men versus Eternals has largely just been the Avengers sitting dead center in the middle. It basically all looked like the Avengers doing their best Herb Dean impersonation, trying to keep one side, the Eternals, from going at the other side, the X-Men, and making it seem as though, oh, the Avengers, we're just in the middle of all this, we don't even really know what's going on, which that part is kind of true, but making it seem as though Ikaris and, the rest of the Eternals are actively trying to fight, against the X-Men was kind of misleading, because that's actually not what's going on here. Like, not even a little bit. Yeah, the Eternals are going to war with the X-Men, but it's largely Druig and Uranos. And yeah, sure, the other Eternals, because there are roughly around 100 Eternals, and even including the Hex, when people think of the Eternals, they mostly just think of the ones that get featured in all of the comics, namely the ones we saw in the Eternals movie. So yeah, it's one of those deals where, yeah, it's not the core Eternals that want to do this. Core Eternals don't want anything to do with this, and it's part of the reason why the new celestial god has been created based off of the original progenitor celestial that came to Earth 1 million years ago. We get to see a little bit more of the process that Makari and Ajax went into to help foster the creation of this new god. I'm not gonna go too deep into it because technically I deep dove into it in the previous video for Judgment Day number 2, so go check that out if you want to go learn more about that. But the real meat of the matter here is the Eternals are fighting back against Druig. They don't want to be any part of this war between the Eternals and the X-Men, and what they ultimately do is they decide to cut off Druig's ability to wield Uranos' armories. And this is kind of where we're going to get into some of the myriad different things. This video is going to be a little more disjointed than other videos I've done in recent memory, and it's largely because we're doing two different issues and covering a lot of stuff between those two. But I did say earlier that I was going to reveal that there is an Eternal who is working alongside the X-Men, and this one, honestly, I kind of felt like, yeah, it was kind of obvious. It's Ikaris. Ikaris is the leader of the Eternals. I love how Kieran Gillen actually personifies and describes Ikaris throughout his Eternals series, which I'm going to go ahead and say right now, if you've never read Kieran Gillen's Eternals, please go do that. It is literally one of the best books Marvel has put out in a long time, and I'm not just saying, oh, it's the best Eternals book. It is that. Don't get me wrong, but I mean, it is literally the best comic Marvel has put out in a long time, and yes, better than a lot, if not all, of the X-Men stuff as of late. But Kieran Gillen's Eternals, they personified Ikaris as being an arrow. An arrow does not think, it does not plan, it just goes precisely where it needs to go. And this right here, this moment where Ikaris is actually coming up with a plan, is kind of, in a way, Kieran Gillen's paying off a lot of the Eternal storytelling, where they were trying to figure out how to change, how to be more than their core programming, and Ikaris is actually doing just that in this issue, coming up with a master plan, something that is a bit above his pay grade, coming up with an idea that completely throws Druig into a position where he's in a no-win situation. Ikaris is going to reach out to someone who is pretty much a frenemy of his in the comics, Gilgamesh. Now, yeah, you'd watch the Eternals movie, you think, oh yeah, these guys, they're buddy-buddy, but that's not the case. In the comics, they're not friendly towards one another and get into fights all the time. It's mostly because they kind of have the same personality, at least when it comes to their drive in completing a task. And Gilgamesh is really no longer part of the core Eternals, even though he does occasionally work with the group from time to time. He's become a member of what is called the Forgotten Ones. Now, this is basically a designation that Zurus, the original Prime Eternal, gave Gilgamesh because he liked saving humans a little bit too much. He was just a little bit too anxious to help out the humans, and Zurus felt that that was a detriment and put him in exile, but not in the same way that Uranos is in exile. Uranos is in exile for being a genocidal maniac. Gilgamesh is not that. He is a champion, and Zurus felt that he needed to be put away. This is why he's a part of the Forgotten Ones, and there are other Forgotten Ones as well who Zurus has put in similar positions in the past, that he just kind of puts them on a shelf and says, hey, you guys just stay out of the way. And Gilgamesh is, for all intents and purposes, for all his brute strength, has become a lot more of a ninja over the years, as opposed to the more Viking-esque look that he's had in the past, especially when he was an active member of the Avengers back in like the late 80s, early 90s. But Ikaris has humbled himself and come to Gilgamesh because he knows that of any other Eternal, Gilgamesh wants to protect humanity just as much as he does, if not more so. Especially in light of recent information that Gilgamesh now knows the same as everybody else does on the Eternals, that if they die, a human will die so that they can be resurrected. They don't have any choice in this matter. Eternals don't get to be like, oh no, I don't want to be resurrected, don't resurrect me. No, they are automatically resurrected by the machine, and for those that don't know, the machine is Earth. All that aside, Gilgamesh and Ikaris, as well as Kingo and Sprite, reach into the Exclusion and take down what is referred to as one of the most dangerous Eternals in recent memory, a guy by the name of Kalos the Destructor. We're not going to spend any time talking about this guy or pontificating about him, because honestly, they don't even really so much fight him as there are distracting him, because what they're wanting to do is cut off the monitoring of the Exclusion, because Kalos is basically maintaining a lockdown across all the cities of the various Eternals that would basically keep anyone who is not an Eternal from getting in, especially a deviant or a mutant in this particular case. And the idea is to shut all this down, and to take down Kalos, they're able to get in and put in an old code that would pretty much undo these eternal lockdowns. This is how the X-Men are able to infiltrate the armories of Uranos in X-Men number 13, and this allows them to run roughshod across the Eternals' machinery and weaponry in that issue. And this is also at the behest of Ikaris. Jean Grey reached out to Ikaris. She is the one who besought Ikaris because she knows that he doesn't want this to be happening. Now, it's never really explicitly explained why Jean knew to reach out to Ikaris, but I'm gonna go on a limb and assume that because the X-Men and the Eternals have technically had dealings with each other in the past, I'm pretty sure Jean Grey just remembered that Ikaris is the leader of the Eternals, not the Prime Eternal, but just he's the guy who is the field leader of the team. He's the Cyclops of the team. So she probably just thought, oh, hey, I remember this guy used to be in charge. We're going against the Eternals. We kind of need to shut this down. Let me just reach out to him and see if, hey, maybe we can come to some kind of an accord. That's basically why this conversation is happening in the first place. But Ikaris is actually the one who tells her how they can shut everything Uranos has thrown at them down, and also stop Druig cold in his tracks. But there's one thing that Ikaris tells her in giving up all this information about Uranos' armories, is that he says, you are not allowed to kill a single Eternal. And this is the part of the situation I feel kind of sucks a little bit, but I get why it was done on Jerry Duggan's part, because what you have to understand is that Ikaris is a proud person. He doesn't want to give up the secret of eternal resurrection. However, he doesn't want any humans to be killed because the X-Men ran in willy-nilly and just started icing Eternals. The X-Men are aware that the Eternals are immortal, but they don't understand how their life-death cycle works. And they especially don't understand the fact that it kills random humans to resurrect an Eternal, but Ikaris doesn't want to give up too much information, so he's basically telling her just enough to be like, hey, you kill any Eternals, I will no longer help you. This whole conversation is null and void, and we're just gonna be back to square one. Now, once again, he's not telling Jean everything, but part of me wonders, just considering the fact that Jean is, once again, a powerful enough telepath to reach into Ikaris's mind, even though he's nowhere near her, and it is revealed that he is not on Earth at the time that this communication is going on. It actually seems like he's on the moon, which is interesting considering that means he's literally right by her house. I wanted to believe that maybe Jean inferred what Ikaris actually meant, but she makes no mention of their resurrection protocols at any point, either during or after this conversation is over. So something tells me, yeah, Jean does not know. But I feel like if Jean really wanted to, she could have pulled that information from him, but Jean is not the same type of telepath that Emma Frost is. Emma Frost would have done it, but Jean is not really that type of person. She's not really into the idea of just snatching things from someone's mind, at least not in this situation. I know some people are gonna bring up, oh, but she outed Bobby Drake as being gay. That's different because that wasn't Jean proper. That was a younger Jean who is not as experienced as the Jean that is here before you today. So that's not the same thing. Anyways, the idea here is that, yeah, the Eternals aren't down with this, and while the new celestial god, which once again is yet to be given a name other than the name that they originally had when they first came to Earth, being the progenitor, but now that this new celestial god has basically rendered his judgment that everyone on Earth has 24 hours to justify their existence to him, the Eternals, or at the very least Ikaris, has given an answer. Death to the Eternals. This could either be a message to misdirect Druig to keep him from realizing his fellow Eternals have turned against him in this brawl for it all between mutants and Eternals. But considering what Gilgamesh says to Ikaris shortly before Ikaris is given his version of the answer, because Gilgamesh says that I know the answer to this riddle that the Celestial God's asking him, and that's when Ikaris eye lasers a message on the wall basically saying, yeah, death to the Eternals. But I feel like Druig is going to see that message and probably think that the X-Men have done this. All that aside, let's get to the final thing I want to talk about real quick, and this is going to be something very easy to sum up. We see in this issue that Charles Xavier, as well as the former Prime Eternal Zurus, are having a battle of the minds against one another, and Kieran Gillen brings up something I thought was a very interesting way to classify things, basically saying that X-Men have a lot of powerful telepaths on their side, and all of the Eternals are telepaths in and of themselves. But here's the thing I found interesting about this, and it's something that I feel has never really been addressed on any meaningful level before today. The idea that the Eternals are telepaths would kind of lead one to think, well, are they as powerful as, characters like Jean Grey or Emma Frost or Charles Xavier, so on and so forth? And the answer that Kieran Gillen gives us in this is no. The way Kieran Gillen puts it, or at least the way the machine puts it, and through Kieran Gillen's penmanship, either way, the machine puts it in video game terminology, saying that mutants do a lot more damage, Eternals have a lot more hit points. This actually makes a great amount of sense because as you think about it, yes, the Eternals, while they are powerful telepaths, they can put images in people's minds, they can use their telepathy at very long ranges, being able to reach other Eternals on other planets, and not just other Eternals, but other living entities as well. They can do a lot of crazy things. Druig is probably one of the more powerful telepaths on the Eternals, able to dominate people in ways that can only resemble things we've seen the X-Men do. But even with that, the X-Men by and large have far more powerful telepaths. Jean Grey being one of them, being an Omega level telepath herself, Kid Omega as well. And even though Emma Frost and Charles Xavier aren't considered Omega level telepaths, they're both more powerful than even Druig. The difference here in what Kieran Gillen is saying by the Eternals have more hit points is just a simple fact that Eternals are more resilient, not just physically, but mentally. So even though you have characters like Charles Xavier, Emma Frost, Jean Grey, Exodus, Kid Omega, well, not Kid Omega right now because he's dead, at least missing, he's not involved in any of this, at least as far as we know. The idea here is that while they could unleash psychic onslaughts that could devastate any Eternal, and we've even seen those telepaths take down the Unimind, at the end of the day, for as far more powerful as Xavier is compared to an Eternal like Zurus, Zurus is far more resilient and can take whatever it is that Xavier has to throw at him. That's why this battle of minds between Zurus and Xavier is a war of attrition, and why neither one of them is actually winning in this fight. It's not until Ikaris steps in and completely lobotomizes Zurus mid-telepathic battle that Xavier's able to take him down. But I thought that was a very interesting commentary on the status quo between Eternals and mutants when it comes to telepathic acumen and ability, because that is something I think has never really been fully addressed at any one point in time. Who has the more powerful telepaths? And the answer is technically they're both powerful. They're just powerful in very different ways. Mutants are telepathic damage dealers. Eternals are telepathic tanks. But anyways, I decided to combine both of these comics into one video because, well, for one, X-Men 13 is literally just something that just kind of happens while this is going on, and this is something that is also kind of just happening while X-Men 13 is happening, so it just kind of seemed like the right move to do. So I don't know. Not only that, the other two X books that came out this week, X-Force number 30 and New Mutants number 28, I believe, neither one of those have anything to do with what's going on with Judgment Day, even though I think erroneously in X-Men number 13, X-Force number 30 is listed as a tie-in, even though it's really not, but that's neither here nor there. There's other stuff that kind of happened between both these books, but there's nothing that I think is surprising or requires any deeper commentary. But that said, if you want to know more about one of the Eternals' most powerful telepaths, check out this video up here to learn all about the character Druig, and if you want to know more about the Eternals in general, check out this video down here. In the meantime, let me know what you thought about a.x.e. Death to the Mutants number 1 and X-Men number 13. Keep it plus ultra and sound off in the comments.